think we're ready to get started. I want to welcome everyone to the 11th installment of the A&A Legacy Series, in which we get acquainted with the legends, heroes, and icons of the numismatic hobby. I am your host, Barbara Gregory, Editor-in-Chief of the Numismatist. And this evening we are very pleased to welcome two special guests, Kenneth E. Bressett and Jeff Garrett, both of whom have had a profound effect on the hobby's most popular reference, a guidebook of United States coins, known affectionately to all as the Red Book. Ken Bressett began his love affair with numismatics in 1943 when he worked as a grocery clerk in Keene, New Hampshire. There he had many opportunities to examine coins as they passed through the register. In 1947, the woman who would become his wife, Bertha Burt Britton, gifted him a Red Book, introduced that year by Whitman Publishing. Shortly thereafter, Ken joined the A&A and in 1954 became a member of the American Numismatic Society. In 1959, he moved with his family, wife Bert, daughter Mary, and sons Philip and Richard, to Racine, Wisconsin, where he joined the Whitman team. Today, Ken is editor emeritus of the Red Book, and over the years, more than 24 million copies of the Red Book have been printed, making it the best-selling nonfiction books, one of the best-selling nonfiction books in American publishing history. Overall, he has written or edited more than a dozen other books. Ken was appointed to the United States Assay Commission by President Lyndon Johnson in 1966. He served as director of the A&A Certification Service from 1982 to 1988 and was instrumental in creating the A&A's official grading standards. He was president of the A&A Board of Governors from 1995 to 97 and was appointed to the U.S. Mint's Citizens Commemorative Coinage Advisory Committee in 1996. Ken has received the A&A's Medal of Merit, Farron Zerby Memorial Award for Distinguished Service, Numismatist of the Year, the Adna G. Wilde Jr. Memorial Award for Exemplary Service, and the Lifetime Achievement Award. And he has been enshrined in the A&A's Numismatic Hall of Fame. He also was presented the Burnett Anderson Memorial Award for Excellence in Numismatic Writing, a joint recognition by the A&A, the American Numismatic Society, and the Numismatic Literary Guild. The latter bestowed upon him its prestigious Clemmy Award, and the American Numismatic Society recognized him with its Distinguished Service Award. Finally, Numismatic News named him a Numismatic Ambassador in 1986. Jeff Garrett remembers hanging out as a kid at the local coin shop on Saturday afternoons. In 1974, he received a Young Numismatist Scholarship to the A&A Summer Seminar, an event that altered the course of his life. He joined the Professional Numismatist Guild in 1982 and later served as its treasurer and president. In 1984, Jeff founded Mid-American Rare Coin Galleries in Lexington, Kentucky. A decade later, he and several friends launched the Bluegrass Coin Club in Lexington, whose monthly meetings draw up to 40 members every evening. In due course, Jeff became more involved in the historic and educational aspects of the hobby, serving as A&A president from 2015 to 2017, and as a consultant to the Smithsonian Institution's National Numismatic Collection. He has written extensively on United States silver and gold coinage, and today is senior editor of the Red Book. Go. Jeff and his wife Mary Lynn reside outside Lexington, where they raised their two children, Beth and Morgan.
Oh, Ben and Morgan.
Ben and Morgan. Beth, I'm sorry. No, Ben and Morgan. In 2005, he was recognized with the A&A's Glenn Smedley Memorial Award. He also has received the PNG's Art Kagan Ambassador Award, Abe Kossoff Founders Award, and Lifetime Achievement Award. He was named a Numismatic News Numismatic Ambassador in 2008. Everyone join me in welcoming Ken Bressett and Jeff Garrett. So Ken and Jeff, when did the two of you first meet? I'm curious about the circumstances and what your first impressions were of one another. And as you tell me about that, let me know what you appreciate most about the other. So Ken, let's begin with you.
I do not clearly remember when I first met Jeff.
It was one with the long hair.
Yes, I think I remember that. It was in a class that I was teaching at the A&A Summer Seminar, and that was 1947, I believe.
74. 74.
74.
74.
Okay, I'll give you that. Yes. 1974 was the first year that I taught a class. Now, as near as I recall, it was on Colonial Coins.
It was.
Is that correct? Yeah.
It was.
On Colonial Coins. And there were probably a dozen people in the class. And so it's hard to clearly remember this kid with long hair. But that was when I first met him. And then I got to know him better because, like so many of the YNs that do attend the summer seminars, you kind of keep an eye on these kids because they are so bright and talented. It's just a joy to watch them develop over the years. That was my impression, and it was a clear and accurate one.
Well, thanks. I remember when I was first won the scholarship, I had to decide kind of what class to take. And there was different ones. I think at the time I thought I already knew how to grade, so I kind of skipped that one. And but I was more interested in more of the esoteric things, and I thought colonials would be something that would be just me a little bit more in-depth knowledge. And when I got there, I was just I think it was the first time I'd actually flown on an airplane, so it was really a lot of firsts for me. And there were a lot of numismatic icons walking around, and I remember I was in awe having taken the class with the editor of Red Book and the person who writes the colonial information, and it was the whole week was I guess it was just enlightening in a lot of factors, but it also made me realize that it was something I truly did love, and was something that I would just wasn't that long after that I kind of decided I wanted to become a coin dealer, and kind of go right into that. Was my career path right from that start. So that summer seminar had to say we had a profound impact is an understatement.
Wonderful. Ken, you've said that Dick Yeoman, the first editor of the Red Book, was a brilliant businessman, and that he taught you the key to success was knowing where and how to find the information and knowledge you sought. Who or what were your go-to sources then, and would you offer today's collectors the same advice that Dick Yeoman gave you?
I would offer that same advice because no person can instantly grab everything that you need to know in this hobby. His theory was that knowing the proper sources for information was vitally important. So you knew who to go to, and what books to use, or what references to use, or how to research whatever it is you're trying to learn or find out about numismatics. So he offered good advice there, and of course he was a brilliant businessman. He was not a great numismatist because he kind of backed into this position that he had of creating the Red Book, and he knew that he needed to build his knowledge of numismatics quickly, and he turned to many of the most important people of the day, people, mostly dealers or longtime collectors way back then, and we relied on them. My mentor was Eric P. Newman, and we spent a lot of time together, and he was just a fountain of knowledge. But many other people, John Ford, Grover Criswell. Well, I can't pull up all those old names. They've been gone for a long time. But anybody who was a specialist in a certain series, I tried to learn from them all that I could. And I think that's the way it should be done today. You can do it very easily today through the A&A's summer seminars, where all these people are assembled and very willing to share their knowledge. And you can do it instantaneously over the internet today, something we didn't have back then.
Well, Ken, when you became editor of the Red Book, what was the very first thing that you wanted to revise, revamp, improve, or build upon?
Well, one thing that irritated me was that the mintage figures were in the back of the book, in a little section in the back of the book. And I thought, why don't we have the mintage figures right there with the coins itself, so that a person can instantly know what there was, and which I did. One of the first things I did was to revise the book that way. Also, I was concerned about the accuracy of each issue, of each coin, which wasn't totally known at that time. And so I made a point of examining, and I had done this before I got the job. I had examined collections like Louis Eliasberg's collection. It was supposed to be complete, but it wasn't. And I had made a note in my notes of what existed, what didn't exist. I took out some of the colonial coins that should never have been there. They weren't really colonial coins. I took out things like the Good Samaritan shilling, which I knew to be a fake. And I just tried to upgrade the book as fast as I could and as thoroughly as I could.
Well, and Jeff, now that you're senior editor and you're building on this legacy of work, likewise, what would you like to revise, revamp, improve upon, or build on?
You know, what's interesting about I became recently the senior editor of Red Book, but I'd actually been going through like I guess you can call it an apprentice program and working on it for, I guess it's been over 10 years now, right? Or close to it, or more than that. Yeah. So one thing about Red Book, it's an iconic brand. It's not something that you rush to change and go in. Anything that does change is going to be thought out very, very, very carefully and with consequences, because there's a lot of people who collect coins based on Red Book and what might be in Red Book or not be in Red Book. So you can't just go yank a coin because you don't like it, because it might impact someone's coin collection. So you have to think about those things. Probably the most important thing that I've tried to work on in the last, actually year or two, with real effort, is the contributor system. The Red Book, the contributor system of the Red Book is what makes it unique, because most of our price guides, they have hired someone to be the person who figures out pricings. They do the book, almost a full-time job, I guess. That 1 week they're doing whatever. The Red Book, we try to draw in the experts from different fields of every series and every parts of the book, from the beginning to the end. And the contributor system is, to me, that being that foundation of it, it had kind of eroded a little bit over decades, because there were, for instance, we went through the list and there were some people that weren't even alive, I think, when I first looked at it. So we were we got to take those guys out. And and then some people had lobbied to be in the Red Book too, and they would really make minimal effort. So I'm trying to right now push it to where I'm trying to get experts really in individual fields, because before you could just go in and put your prices in and decide what you wanted to put prices in. So I'd much rather someone pick, let's say, seeded coinage and give me good prices for every seeded coin and really focus on that. So probably my biggest change that I want to do, you really won't see from a aesthetic standpoint, because it's really, I'm focusing on be the best price guide possible. And there's other things like a few other series that maybe bust dollars that kind of got a few varieties in it that probably you don't need. But in general, that's a slow process to make changes to Red Book. But I'm always working on quality. So that's probably the most important thing to me right now with pricing.
Great. Ken, you've said that when you met Dick Yeoman at a coin convention in the mid-1950s, you shared with him some errors that you found in a recent edition of the Red Book. Do you remember what those errors were and how Dick Yeoman reacted to your criticism?
Well, I just mentioned a few of those things, like the Good Samaritan shilling that doesn't exist, and mostly minor editorial things that were bothersome to me, because some coins that belonged there, some coins that did not belong there. We had a nice conversation the first time I met him, and he seemed to accept all of that very graciously. Fortunately, he asked me to make those corrections, write to him and make all of those things that I thought ought to be corrected, which he accepted and did. And the following year, he asked me if I would do that again, perhaps more thoroughly, which I did. And after that, he asked if I'd go to work for him permanently. Well, now this interim thing. Let me back up a minute. After I did and sent him this material of suggested corrections, I asked my wife if I said, I'm going to charge him for this, and I don't know what I should charge him. I think I'm going to ask for $100 for the work that I did. And she said, are you crazy? But I asked anyway, and he was very happy to pay the $100, and the rest was history.
Ken, you know that many young collectors lose interest in numismatics in high school and college, but you continued to pursue the hobby during those formative years. And so what was it about coin collecting that appealed to you?
I've always been a history buff. I very much enjoy history and learning all about our history. And so I think that was the basis. But in delving into that, I learned so many other things about geography and artistry and metallurgy. There's so many disciplines that you can learn simply by studying coins, and that appealed to me greatly. I looked at the hobby as an educational tool. I've enjoyed it very much, and I continue to enjoy it to this day. And not so much for pride of ownership or profit or anything like that. I guess I'm more interested in just enjoying the hobby and the people that are involved in the hobby with like interests.
And Ken, what was it like moving to New Hampshire from Wisconsin to join the Whitman staff? I'm sure you faced some challenges as you climbed the editorial ladder at Red Book headquarters, and I wondered if you might share a couple of those with us.
What made it easy was if you've ever lived through a New Hampshire winter, you can well understand why I was quite happy to move away to something a little more decent weather. The challenges.
What challenge did you face as you took on more and more responsibilities there?
In moving into the business world, because the publication is a business world, and that's I think of as my world, not buying and selling numismatics. I never got really deeply into that, but learning the business world. And Dick Yeoman, Richard R.S. Yeoman, was a master at economics and how to go about marketing and presenting products properly. So that was a challenge, but it was an educational thing that I adapted to quite readily.
Jeff, you've said you wouldn't be here today were it not for the help and support of an early mentor, and that was coin shop owner Ed French. Mm-hmm. What lessons did you learn from him, and how important is such guidance to the future of the hobby?
Ed was a great guy. He had the classic hole-in-the-wall coin shop in Dunedin, Florida, and I had the great fortune to live within a bicycle ride of that. So I was able to go there a lot. When I first got hooked on coins, it could be, go down there as often as I want. And he was very welcoming. It might have because he liked the free labor, but it was. He would let me come in and go through things, and I could learn by observing. But he did teach me that there was him, and also there was a few other guys in the area that I learned from an early age that knowledge is power, and that the more I could know about something, because I unlike Ken, I got really into the trading aspect very early age. I mean, by 15, I was really hustling, and one of my big advantages, I would memorize Red Book. So that helped. I would study that thing really carefully, and so he taught me about that, and learning, the more you know, the more you can make, and you can have an advantage over everyone else, and that still goes on today. But the only thing is now the young kids I compete against now can get on their telephone and know about more than I probably ever knew. So it's a different world.
Yeah.
But in those days, and I just had a good memory about it. And he did teach me about mentoring, and I've tried to continue that going forward. Every chance I get it, if a young person's interested, I've had several in the Lexington area that have become actually successful now themselves, and I try it's kind of like later in my life, going through the give back phase, where I know that the future of the hobby is never guaranteed, and the more we mentor other young people, that it'll pay off for everyone.
Whitman publisher Dennis Tucker wrote in the March 2012 issue of the Numismatist, "The future of every antiquarian hobby is not children, but well-informed adults with a solid education in the social sciences and humanities and an appreciation of the past. Any given hobbyist's efforts would be better focused on sparking a child's interest in world and American history, social studies, the fine arts, the history of technology, and similar topics, and letting them veer toward whatever collectible they find intriguing." Do you two agree with this statement, and in what ways do you believe the Red Book creates well-informed adults? Ken?
Well, I totally agree with that. Absolutely. I probably taught Dennis that.
Probably.
No,
Like
I jest. But yes, absolutely. The statement is exactly the way I feel. How does the Red Book do that? Well, we're just one of many tools. We try to be as accurate as possible, and we try to present information that's relevant to that. And I think we do that because it's not just a price guide, and it's not just a list of dates and things. There's a lot of information in there if a person takes time to read through all of the Red Book. I think it's pretty well constructed and leads a person down that path.
Jeff, what are your thoughts?
I agree somewhat. I do, and I've been involved with other things like with the U.S. Mint, having discussions with them, and being with the A&A, what to do with young people. I think that it's important to plant numismatic seeds with the 5, 10, 15 age, well, 5, 10, a little bit more than that, so that maybe they've been exposed to coins and they see it, and then later on they would be, pick it back up when they, have either more money or have an interest in and have the time and the funds to do that. Of course, history, I love history myself, so I know that's a fact that, history is a strong thing. I'm not an educator, but I talk to other people, and they tell me that school systems now don't teach history like they used to because they're more interested in, test scores and things like that. And I think that's been a big problem. I don't know if problem's right, but challenge is a better word, where the A&A has tried to, reach out to schools, and they push back and say, we just more care about their, scores that we're going to get for our funding and things like that. So it is a challenge. I think that, if we can, because history is really telling stories, and the more we tell stories that attract, that even young people or older people can attract to, it would be good. The Red Book, I think, plays an important role in a lot of this because it is the one book that's probably the most comprehensive. Like if you want to find out about coin collecting, like start from scratch, this book goes the most basic things to very advanced things. And I'm proud of the fact that, there's people who buy the book every year for, their entire life. So it's, and they're always looking, to have that and actually collect them. But then also it may be, I'd say for a lot of people, it's the first book they buy. So that's really a unique place in the marketplace for a book that, the absolute beginner buys, and people who, I would say 75% of the coin shops dealers have one at their desk side, when they're on a daily basis. So, it's that fundamentally important a book.
One of the things we have to consider each year is to alter the book just enough to keep the interest
Yeah.
up, because people do buy it. Some people buy it every year.
Yeah.
We find most people buy it like every 3 years.
Yeah.
But we like to keep it fresh and active all
Yeah.
the time. And believe me, there's always a lot of new information and new issues and
Yeah.
new things to go into it to
Yeah.
try to keep it alive and active. My goodness, it's been going on for 60 some odd years.
Yeah. I'd say about every
now.
year they
And
tackle a subject and have a new chapter about something.
We have something to tempt
Right.
new buyers, yes. It's not stagnant at all.
No, it's not, definitely. Ken, you are an inspirational leader and a collegial joiner, having been appointed to the U.S. Assay Commission and the U.S. Mint Citizens Commemorative Coin Advisory Committee, and you co-founded the Rittenhouse Society. Which of those roles, leader or joiner, gives you the greatest pleasure?
Well, I suppose one would always be more proud of being a leader. If you mention that, when I served in many capacities as advisor to the Treasury Department or the government, and I have done that many times over the years. I took great pride in being asked to do that and in doing that, but it also was a disillusionment because I found that my sage advice was not always heeded, and it's very difficult to work in Washington, and it says that hasn't been the greatest pleasure in my life because I don't think I've been very instrumental in changing what I think are problems. As a joiner or whatever, I don't know. I'm very proud of the Rittenhouse Society, which is probably unknown to most people. But when I was quite young, Dave Bowers and I think it was around 1950-something, 52 maybe, 54 I believe, we started something called the Rittenhouse Numismatic Society. I'm very proud of that Dave and I did that. And we joined the Young Numismatists of the Year. We weren't called Young Numismatists then, but we were. There were about 8 of us. The people you maybe remember and read about, Walter Breen and Bob Julian, myself, Grover Griswold, Dick Johnson. We got together and said, oh, poo on these dealers. They're old and stodgy, and we're going to have our own group of people. We'll share our information and be loyal and dedicated writers and help each other, which we did. And now, whatever it is, 50 years later, we're still a very active group with some of the most brilliant minds in the hobby that have been elected. You have to be, it is a by invitation only society, but you have to be a published author and expert in your field. So it's a tight little in-group, but I'm very proud of that it's lasted this long and that we've been very successful. We are the only such club that not only one of the longest lasting, but the only one that the ANA recognizes as special enough to be listed in the directory in your program, and so I'm very proud of that.
It's a wonderful group of folks.
Yeah, and you're a wonderful member.
Oh, thank you. Ken, as a member of the Citizens Commemorative Coinage Advisory Committee, you helped advance the Mint's 50-state quarters program.
Yes.
You mentioned a little bit about that experience, that you felt that maybe your suggestions didn't go over as well as you might have liked.
Right.
But how did the inclusion of all those various designs in the Red Book complement or complicate the book's content and production?
Well, it goes on because they have continuing programs now. Yes, it has complicated the Red Book and everything in our minds too, I think. It's become so vast that it's hard to contemplate what these things are. In the beginning, we envisioned a very short program, the 50 states, and it was successful. It still is kind of successful, but I think that there's diminishing returns now. It's complicated, the Red Book, in that we have to like add a couple of new pages every year. As a publisher, you know you don't add 2 pages to a book. You add 16 or nothing. And that becomes a problem. And so we have to, and you'll find just how difficult this is, Jeff.
Yeah. Well, someday we've already had conversations that someday it'll probably have to break the book in some. Probably have to be a demarcation line and have 2 books at some point, because it'll basically get like that. You know, it'll be.
It's getting out of hand.
Yeah.
With the bullion and the other things that have to be added every year, and as I say, when you reach that tipping point where you have to add pages, you can't add 2 or 3. You have to add 16. So what do? You write some article that's contemporary and stick that in there because it makes sense and it's kind of interesting in that, and then you eat up those pages a few at a time, and a couple of years later you got to go through the whole process over again. It's a very problematical thing that we have to contend with.
Yeah, we tried taking bullion, some of the bullion coins out for a year or so, and then there was a lot of people were upset about that, so we had to actually put them back in. So it was, you know, like I said earlier, change in Red Book really affects a lot of people. That
it does.
You know, Mary Burleson hates getting letters. So
well, one year Dennis wanted us to take out a lot of the, I think it was the Philippine coins,
right.
Condense that down just because we needed those couple extra pages. And boy, everybody complained about that.
Yeah, if you collect Philippine coins, all of a sudden it's less desirable.
And now we have to, and the same with some bullion pieces.
Yeah.
So it's a constant challenge.
Well, Jeff, if you had to choose your favorite chapter or section in the Red Book, what would it be?
Probably for me is Colonial Coins, because it's an interesting part of the, I love American history. Like I said, it's part of the founding of our nation, so a lot of the coins there are pre the founding. And also, I think it's fascinating too, because there's a lot of price guides out in the universe for coins, but there's not many that cover colonials. So colonials are really, in the Red Book, it's like the go-to source for it. So I think that's a really important part of the book. I'd say a close second is the territorial issues in the back, and it's sort of for the same reasons. It's the go-to source for those different series. And they're both, you know, there's coins that are $10 and there's coins that are $1 million. So it's a very interesting, diverse group of coins, and it's not like, you know, date and mint mark and stuff like that. It's sometimes, a lot of times it's one coin of that type, and it's got a great history and a little story, and it goes with it. So if you're like reading the Red Book for entertainment, it's probably more entertaining than other parts of the Red Book.
And Ken, do you have a favorite chapter or section in the Red Book?
Actually, it's the colonials.
Colonials too.
I have to mirror what Jeff just said. I was brought up on colonials. I just love that series, and yes, that would be my favorite, easily.
Well, Ken, when you relinquished the day-to-day management of the Red Book to Jeff and to research editor Q. David Bowers, what feelings did you have at that time?
Well, that was my decision to make that change because I knew it was coming eventually, and I thought we would needed to plan ahead and plan for it. So the short answer is relief. It's your problem now, Jeff.
That's right.
And Ken, you've mentioned that in the Red Book, no typographical error ever goes unnoticed. And you explained that the numismatic community demands accuracy.
Yeah.
Do you recall any particularly noteworthy gaffes or critics?
Yes. There are certain colonial coins that, because they're all hand engraved, the lettering is individual, and sometimes the lettering is wrong. Or early American coins will have misspellings and funny things. So I had the bright idea once of, there's a Vermont copper coin where a C is backwards on it. And so because did hand typesetting back then, so I said, well, that's the easy thing to do. We turn the thing upside down. And so the book goes to press, and the pressman stopped it and came running upstairs and said, there's a mistake here. I said, no, that's the way I wanted it. We just go and print it that way. And every once in a while, one of these misspellings, a pressman or somewhere along the line, someone will complain, oh, that's wrong. We got to change that. And we have to make a quick decision not to change it if that's the way we really want it. There have been, let's see, what was your total question again so I can get back to it?
The fact that everyone demands accuracy, and I wondered if there was any particularly memorable critics or problems.
Oh, yes. Well, the most memorable one was when we left a page out.
Oh.
Yes.
That'll do it.
Yes, that is a problem. 1980. I want to say 1983. I'm not sure, but we went to press that time. Now leaving a page out of a book like that is a complicated thing, because the forms for printing are huge, and there's multiple pages in a big form, and it's easy to strip in double one page and leave one page out, and that's just what happened. So we go to press. Dick Yeoman says, I'm off for vacation. He went off fishing, and so we're sitting there, and the pressman comes running. There's a page missing. What do we do? I don't know. We call Yeoman and see what we should do about this. And he says, well, you've already run some books, but stop it, and we'll correct it. It's easy to correct, really. You just make new printing plates and go back to press, which we did. So some of the books have two of the same page on one, and then one page missing. And to mediate the problem, we announced that this happened, and if you've got a book that was wrong and you're not happy with it, we'll send you that missing page. We printed some of that missing page. I've never recall anybody ever asking for that missing page. I didn't bother to save one. I'd love to have one of those, that one missing page.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, and I think the error book has a premium price to it. It's all written up in Frank Colati's book on the Red Book.
That's right.
If anyone's interested, or I can research it.
The Red Book on Red Books.
The Red Book of Red Books,
Right.
yeah. But things like that happen, and mistakes were made. One book has the 1908 SVDB cent listed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And people catch that. And Dick Yeoman used to say, yeah, don't worry. Your readers, users of the book are your best proofreaders. And sure enough, some specialists will catch the most minute mistake that you can possibly imagine. Transposition of numbers in a mintage. Why do people read the mintage reports? and it actually, I'm
glad they care.
Well, I'm glad they care, but it's kind of meaningless. But if you're off by 2 digits, they go nuts. Yep. And so you have to watch for that.
Jeff, people often talk about aha moments when they make a meaningful discovery. How has the Red Book contributed to some of your own aha moments?
I spend a lot of time analyzing pricing. So that's really what, the core function of what I do is I go through databases and I study auction records. I look at, how we price compared to another coin. And, luckily I buy and sell coins a lot too. So it gives me a real good basis for my knowledge of knowing what's what. But I'd say my biggest aha moments, when every year I do it, I'll be going through this and I'll look at it and then I'll see a series that's getting soft, or I see a series that's, going up in price. But also, I think the biggest thing at aha to me is to understand some things that to me seem like they're underpriced. You know, like when I kind of can see historical averages, things that I think that, you know, they're coins at the same price they were 20 years ago, or coins that now they're a lot higher. They've gone way up a lot. And so I think that for me, it's kind of always a discovery when I'm analyzing those databases. I learn an awful lot about that. So it's, you know, I'm not necessarily looking for like mintage figures as much, things like that, or you know, I don't study the history because I take a lot of it for gospel that it's been there so long it's probably correct, but the pricing changes every day, and I try to really get that right. And I think that's probably I get more startled occasionally. It's like, wow, that coin really went down a lot, or something like that. So that's probably my biggest aha thing on that.
I know. So Ken, if you were to offer Jeff one bit of advice about the Red Book, its management and compilation, what would that bit of advice be?
Be considerate of your readers. The Red Book seems to belong to everybody, and they really take a personal interest in it, and you have to be considerate of their wants and their needs and what should be in there, and do it sincerely, with no bias, no ulterior motives. Just be as sincere as you can and considerate of your readers, because they really take ownership of the book.
Yeah, for sure. It's good advice.
Yeah.
And Ken, Dave Bowers writes that during your tenure as Red Book editor, you devised names for coin types, such as the classic head, matron head, petite head for large copper cents, and capped bust for silver coins.
Mm-hmm.
Were some coin types and names a challenge? Did you think of several that were descriptive but not necessarily appropriate?
Well, yes, in the back office we certainly did some of that. It is a challenge, and here's the challenge. You have only so much space in that line that has the mintage figure and the description of the coin and the date and the prices. Yeah, just has so much space. So when you have to describe a coin, you have to be as succinct as possible, and use some abbreviations and all, and that's the challenge. And now the answer is not always easy, and sometimes you have to make up things. As far as the words that I've made up, gee, I don't think offhand too many things. Double die cent, I do believe I invented the term double die for the 1955, and that has stuck. The terms classic commemoratives and modern commemoratives I invented, and that's become commonplace. I suppose there are many other things that just seem natural to me. You need to make up a word, and you do your best and stick it in there and hope it flies.
And it doesn't surprise you that those names have lasted all these years?
I didn't ever think much about that, but I'm pleased that people haven't complained.
Jeff, are there any names that you think are particularly appropriate, or ones that you might like to see changed?
You know, we deal with that occasionally. There'll be, like, what do we call, I think one recently, if I remember right, the 1916 dime, the gold coin, you know, is that coin a commemorative, or is it a bullion coin, or is it a dime? So where do you put that? Where does that go in the book? So, and the same thing with the 1916 gold half dollar. And I remember quite the flurry of emails back and forth about trying to decide that exact decision. Yep. And then what to call it, and you know, where it'll end up landing in the book. Because if you put it in the dime section, well, Whitman's going to need to put a space in their album for it. If you put it in the bullion section, that's a different. So it has, you know, it has really long-term ramifications. And when you make those decisions, you're kind of wanting to make a forever decision, because you don't want to make it and then change, because that's worse. Yep. So we really think it through. And I'd also like to bring up the fact that, you know, now I'm senior editor, but I don't make any decision really without talking to, you know, circulating it with Ken Bressett, Dave Bowers, and also the brilliant staff of Whitman. We've got it's really a big team effort, and we got a really brilliant people. Dennis is fantastic. He's a wonderful wordsmith. He comes up with some things to me. I'm sometimes like, oh, I just have a quick answer, which I jump to conclusions a lot. Then he'll say, well, you got to think this through, and it might impact that and that, and he's really good about that. So I as a writer, especially for Whitman, I've come to really value editors because they make you look good in the end. So I really, it's a great team, and I'd say, titles are a big deal because it's a forever thing.
Mm-hmm. And Jeff, you mentioned before that you're intrigued by the stories behind coinage, and this is especially evident in your book, 100 Greatest U.S. Modern Coins, which you co-authored with Scott Schechter. Are you tempted sometimes in the Red Book to expound on some items in there that you are particularly fond of or intrigued by? And if so, which ones?
Yeah, that's a good question. My first book that I did in that series was 100 Greatest U.S. Coins, and those are all the classic rarities. And I think since they're both Whitman products, we had even had an idea about maybe one time notating if with a star if a coin is in the 100 Greatest book, as an idea. But I don't think that really got much traction. Some of the coins I like in the modern series, I love the S mints, like from the 60s through the maybe early 2000s without S mints. That have been kind of, some are super rare and then some are affordable, and I really like those a lot. And the main purpose of the 100 Greatest Modern book is to pretty much all the coins in that first book are unaffordable for collectors. So I had a lot of people ask me, can you write a book with some stories of some, like that people can know that these coins are you could buy them. So 80% of the coins are probably under $1,000, so they're affordable. I've even had people say, can you write a book, the 100 Greatest Coins under $100, things like that. So people like the stories, and they do like lists. So, and I think that's, kind of pulling for that. I like them all because they're all good stories. So.
And Jeff, you've worked closely with the Smithsonian Institution and its National Numismatic Collection. Mm-hmm. Among your collaborations, which one was most memorable? And did it alter your personal or professional perspectives?
Yeah, probably. When I mentioned the 100 Greatest U.S. Coin book a minute ago, that kind of started my relationship with the Smithsonian probably 15 years ago. When I started writing that book, a lot of the coins I realized were in that collection. I had to go there to photograph them, to write about them, and that started my relationship with them because I would go, quite often. I'd go probably every few weeks at that time when I was really trying to put that together. Also with Tom Mulvaney to do photography, and about that time, so 2003, which now is, I guess, 16 years ago, the Smithsonian decided to do a remodel of the core part of the museum to put in the Star Spangled Banner. And when they decided to do that, that was great for the museum, but it was right where the coin collection had been for 50 years. And it was pretty much a quick decision. It was like, coins were coming down, and I think it was probably not even a month or so heads up on it. And the numismatic community was kind of shocked. It's like, wow, that's unbelievable. So the first thing they had to do was actually take them down, because as you remember, the Lilly collection filled a room. It was you come in and it was like, it was a linear collection. It was a lot different than museums today, because it started in 1795 with the gold coin, U.S. gold coins, all the way up to 1932, one of every coin in mint mark. And museums don't do that. That's not how they present now. But the coins had to be literally taken off the wall, and the coins were stuck to the wall in wax. So they were like, a wad of wax was behind each coin. It was like stuck to the wall, which is kind of hard to believe with $10 million coins. So a team of about probably 10 or 15 people came in, and we took the coins down carefully, put them in back in the cabinets where they were, and then that started a long collaboration with the museum to try to raise funds. They had an opportunity to put the coins back up on exhibit. We did one first in the castle. I think it was called Legends and Numismatics. Then we did another opportunity, came up back in the museum, much smaller, probably a tenth the size, Stories on Money. I helped raise money for that, and then that was up for 4 or 5 years. And in that meantime, I was still doing research. I did Encyclopedia of Gold in conjunction with the Smithsonian, which was probably my most important book that I'd written, because it was really in depth and had a color photograph of every U.S. gold coin for the first time. So because based on that collection, so I was there a lot working with the museum, and I got to know several of the David Allison, the director of curatorial affairs, one day said we have a really nice space that we could put the coin collection in the East Wing renovation, but it's going to take almost $2 million commitment to have it there for 20 years. So I knew it was an opportunity that the hobby couldn't miss because it is so impactful. So luckily, I was able to help raise the money for that, and that probably the most memorable thing for me is the probably opening night to see that gallery. So that was really a great thing.
Well, in that new interactive numismatic exhibit, The Value of Money, is there one piece in there that you feel is an absolute must-see?
Well, I give tours quite often with friends or important possible donors, and people come through there, and I go through and I talk about this and this and this, and it kind of starts on the right. You start off with the kind of stories, the history of money, and work your way around. And at the last, when you get near the end, there's a big case. It's a glass case, and it's called Legends and Numismatics. Back to that, Legends. And there's a case of just unbelievable coins. And some people ask me this sort of the same question, and I tell them, if I could just take one and I could never sell it, but could just have it, I would probably pick one of my personal favorites is the $50, the 1877 $50 gold pieces, the half unions. They're this big. They're just spectacular. They're both unique, only in the Smithsonian. And if I could just slip one of those out of there, that'd be the one I'd get.
Well, Jeff and Ken, does the time you spend on the Red Book interfere substantially with your work as owner and founder of Mid-American Rare Coins? That's for you, Jeff. And how do you strike a balance between these and your family life?
That's a good question. It can be tough. Luckily, I buy and sell coins on an ongoing basis, so I've got good knowledge, and when I tackle it, I can hit it pretty hard and get through it. A lot of times, it's kind of like I call it my Red Book season, and in the past, it would be I would just go in and kind of go down the basement and just shut down and work on the Red Book, and actually in the job I get a little behind schedule. Then I have to take off days from work and stay home, and because I can't do it at the office because the phone's too distracting, and I can't really think about buying and selling coins while I'm doing the Red Book. So it does less nights out to restaurants, that's for sure. My wife can probably tell you that. But my wife is very supportive. My daughter has been supportive. My son is supportive, and when we get to it, I just kind of stay focused and try to knock it out. And I'd say it is tough. I'd say anybody that that works 80 hours a week doing anything, you got to balance that.
And likewise, Ken, what was it like for you balancing work, your hobby, and your family life?
Well, I've always thought of my job as being a writer and in the writing and publishing business, actually, and numismatics just happened to be my main focus, and I just enjoy what I do all the time, and my family has accepted that, and so it's been a very pleasant life. I would not change anything.
Jeff, you've said that we all know that many believe that the ready availability of online information, communication, and entertainment is a detriment to the numismatic hobby, but you disagree with that, and why is that?
Well, a lot of people are concerned, especially, it is a problem with young people because they're so, I'd say addicted is probably the best word for that, with like social media and things. But I would say the hobby right now, 19 years later after the internet really got rolling, would probably be a fraction the size it is now if it hadn't been for the internet, hadn't come along, because it's created, it's if you lived in Lexington, Kentucky 25 years ago, your choice of buying coins was Coin World, and maybe you went to a coin show. Now you can sit in at home and you can buy coins from all over the world, and it's just opened up the accessibility of coins massively. So I know for a fact Deloy Hansen is currently he's a super wealthy collector has spent well over $200 million on coins in the last 4 or 5 years. So that's just gigantic. He started I first met him, he bought a coin on my website. It's like just, hey, how much is that coin? He was sitting at home for entertainment buying coins on the internet. And he got addicted to it, luckily coins are addictive, so that's a good thing. And also it's had a big impact as far as, we already touched about it earlier, is so one of the reasons also that I really got into books to try to educate collectors, a collector will spend more money with more confidence when they feel they know something. So if you give transparency is very, very important. So if you can tell a collector that wants to spend $1,000 a month on coins that here's what one sold at auction for, here's what it catalogs, here's how many are known of the coin, here's everything you ever want to know about the coin, they feel more confident, and that people spend more, it stimulates the hobby from a financial point. So I'd say the distribution of knowledge is just, I can't say how profound the impact is for that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jeff. If your older self were to write a note of advice to your younger self, what would it be?
I guess follow your heart's desire and be sincere about what you do and do the best you can.
And Jeff, how about you?
I would say budget my time better. So I try to avoid the stress because I love coins, but I have to admit that I take on so much it gets stressful occasionally.
Well, along those lines then, Jeff, we've got hardcover, spiral bound, mega red. What's the next big thing on the horizon for the Red Book?
Well, like I said earlier, they don't make changes too rapidly. Everything's thought out really, really well. You mentioned Mega Red. That was really one of the biggest advances for Red Book in a long, long time. If people haven't seen it, it's about this big. It's really kind of like a lot of coin dealers like it because it has all the varieties you want to know about every different coin. It's things that I've wanted to have in Red Book over the years that couldn't be in Red Book because of space. It's almost like you mentioned earlier about space limitations. It's like, let's have a Red Book without space limitations. And what that looked like, well, it looks like that. Yeah. So it's a big book. I would think the most natural thing, and actually I talked to Mary Burleson here about it just a little bit. At some point, there'll probably be an online element. I mean, it'll have to go to some sort of version of that because the world is going in that direction without stop or fail. So we'll have to address that because there's, even as big as the Mega Red is, there's things that you could give more information, especially your pricing now, because pricing is very, very difficult now because you can have an MS65 coin that, let's say, catalogs $1,000 in Red Book. You go to an auction and one sells for $500. 2 lots later, one sells for $1,500. Well, what price are you going to pick? So it's very difficult. So there'll be more need going forward because you'll need to convey more information. So I'd say at some point it'll probably be some sort of online version, but nothing happens quickly. So let's see how that goes.
And Jeff, you've said that the dealer community is a grossly undervalued resource. So I'm wondering, what opportunities do you think they have for inspiring collectors and influencing the hobby?
I think the reason I said that before, I think it was when I was even president, is like so many coin dealers. One thing when I was president, I really wanted to try to do was to work with expanding relationships, because relationships, strategic partners are really good. If you can get a company like Littleton Coin Company, which has done this, send out an A&A membership application to 100,000 customers, well, that's really focused and really a wonderful, wonderful thing. I think that one thing I preach to all of the young people I try to mentor, other coin dealers, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems in the coin business for the last 25 years is that some of the best and brightest, smartest guys, best eyes, good business guys, they've made a business of buying a coin from one coin dealer, cracking it out, trying to get it upgraded, and selling it to another coin dealer. And it's hard to get them to not do that because they make good money doing that. But it's destructive for the hobby, for pricing, because that makes for a lot of different reasons. Also, these guys aren't using their skills to, be like Stax. 50 years ago, they built a book of business, and you're working with collectors and trying to, grow the hobby. So, a lot of the guys that I think are super talented, I'd like to see them spend more time actually trying to make the hobby better than just trying to how much money they can make.
Right. Can some people trace the serendipitous events in their lives that led them to their current situations? For example, if I hadn't visited my sister in college, I wouldn't have met her friend Alan, who introduced me to early American history and art, which ultimately led to my interest in colonial coppers. So briefly, briefer than I just did, how would you describe your respective journeys to becoming editor of the Red Book?
To becoming editor? Well, I guess briefly, I took that chance of challenging R.S. Yeoman to make some changes and upgrade the book the way I wanted to see it. Maybe that was a bold thing for a youngster to do, but I would advise anybody else to be that bold and forward. If you have information that needs to be shared, share it with everybody. So I guess that was my moment.
And Jeff, how about you?
That was pretty easy for me. So in 1969, a family friend gave me a Whitman album for pennies, and based on my obsessive personality, I couldn't stand the holes. So I worked on that really, really hard. As a matter of fact, it was funny. My wife and I, about 2 weeks ago, went to visit Littleton Coin Company, and I'd never been there before. It's fantastic to see for the first time. And I told them in 1969 the first coin I ever bought was a 1941 S penny from Littleton Coin Company because I needed to fill that hole. So I started with coin collecting with Whitman. First time I went to summer seminar, I worked with Ken Bressett, who's editor of Red Book, and now I guess that's 50 years, right? 50 years. 50 years later, now I'm editor of Red Book, so it's kind of a nice big circle.
That's great. Well, at this point, I'd like to open up the floor to some audience questions, and we'll take a number of questions here. So, just if you have a question for Jeff or Ken, just raise your hand, and Caleb Noel, the managing editor of the Numismatist, will hand you a mic.
Hi, I guess this is for Jeff. You mentioned about pricing, and I think the Red Book, for the territorials and for the colonial, there aren't a lot of easy, accessible pricing. But how do you, let's say the Coin Dealer newsletter could kind of be a pricing thing, but even I come to the World's Fair of Money every single year, and I don't buy the Red Book every year, but I do every 2 or 3 years. And this year, I bought the 2019, and I look at the 2020, and it's like I'm looking, and it's like the pricing's almost all the same and everything. And because of let's say the recent bump in gold, it's like, well, I might as well wait till next year because it's not going to be reflective, even though the date is 2020, we're in 2019. How do you, what do you want to do, I guess, for the pricing?
Well, when you, so as Ken can tell you, so right near press time, we always say, okay, where are we going to peg gold for common bullion coins? So I think this year gold had been $1,250 for 6 months or more. It was really right up $1,200, something like that. We try to give it a little bit of bump, maybe $1,300. Well, gold now is $1,500. So you wouldn't use, it wouldn't be applicable for common bullion coins. But I know I follow it pretty well, track it really carefully. But for scarce coins and collectible coins, some coins didn't change a lot in the last year, so you don't see a lot of changes. But I would say, in general, most coins are pretty, and that book's pretty accurate from a retail price guide on the coins other than bullion. So anytime, and we put in there in the book, the basis is stated in the front of the book. I think it's the front or the back. I think it's the front, but it says basis $1,300 gold, but of course, it's readily. I could find out. I can tell you my phone in 2 seconds what common bullion coins are now. So it's not the go-to book for that. But for rare coins, I'm pretty proud of the pricing. I think it's spot on, but that's my opinion.
Another question.
Anybody else? Gary. one in the back.
Bob?
Yeah, I just wanted to commend Ken. Back in the old days when we worked on the Red Book together in Racine, Wisconsin, and if you think about pricing data nowadays compared to what we worked with back then, we would get a big stacks of sheets like a telephone book and go through everybody's input that they put in on punch cards and so on. And nowadays, with Jeff taking over, it's all electronic. So it's a totally different, in a sense, the way you pull the numbers and everything together. But the book itself, just based on your dedication to the Red Book and so on, has kept it to be an iconic book. Even though technology has moved far ahead, the Red Book is still a reliable and a great resource to collectors that love to, a lot of collectors that buy one every year because they just want to collect them. And so I think that's a testament to you and the dedication you put into it. So just want to say congratulations on that.
The process has been modernized through the use of computers and all, but we still try to scan every entry and know who submitted the prices and know who's fudging a little bit, and we throw out the numbers that we don't believe in.
Yeah, and I'm trying to, it's not as fully digitized as you would hope. I would hope, because there's quite a few people that I use as contributors that I still had to print it out for them that are pretty unfamiliar with Excel. So I print it out to them, I FedEx it to them, they FedEx it back. So, I say going forward, everyone will maybe get more familiar with it, and I might have to, maybe that'd be a good summer seminar class, Excel. It might be good.
In case any of you don't know, Gary Atkins was one of our, and still is a contributor, one of our good ones, and Don Kagan, and bless his heart, his father Art was just a superb contributor of price. I don't know how he did it, but he knew the price of everything at every moment.
He was doing auctions every month.
Yeah.
And that's how we do. How many contributors do you have now?
Well, I would say probably close to 100 people are listed, and then I would say of that, there is an activity basis. I would say the last one I did were probably 40 to 50 that were like really into it, and then some I have to I got some information, but it's like I mentioned earlier, you might have been here, but it was a contributor process. I'm trying to really work in with specialists, and I'd rather have someone pick a series and really spend some time on that series and get it right. And well, like you helped with territorial, you were a perfect example this last time. I didn't ask you to do Morgan dollars. I wanted you to focus on your specialty and numbers that I can trust and know, and from world-class experts. So I'm going in that direction where and it's almost it really is, it's a little bit difficult sometimes, because a lot of people like to say in their bios, I'm a Red Book contributor. Well, that's good, but you're really going to have to up. I'm probably going to put their feet to the fire. They're going to have to up their game to keep that credential. So
well, many people have been, shall we say, grandfathered in because they've been contributors for such a long time, but they're perhaps not as involved as they used to be. And this looks like a sweet spot when we can change over. It's his responsibility now, and I can blame anything on him. But it is probably time to reconsider the contributors to be contemporary.
Because if a good contributor makes my job a lot easier. If if a guy gives me a series, especially that I'm not really super confident in, if a guy comes in and just does pricing on a few coins, well, it helps me so much better if he's really done his work and done his homework, and I can compare it to prices last year, prices from another, because most series have more than one contributor, of course. So that there's a kind of like a consensus type thing that goes on, and so that's why I'm not wanting to push to punish anybody. It's really I want to push to make the book better, and that the better information I receive, the better the book will end up being. So it's good for everyone in the end of the day.
I don't really have a question. I'd like to make a comment. Ken, when you were talking about having Jeff in class at the summer seminar, and you commented how you're really impressed by those kids and you want to watch them, I thought what you were going to say is you really had to watch those kids because I might be working for them someday.
There you go.
Yes, and a question up front here.
Guys, as a retired school principal and a teacher, I loved what each of you said in terms of youth coming up, planting numismatic seeds and having an awareness of history and art and everything that makes up coins. But I also thought, too, we have so much passion in this room and so much knowledge in this room. The extent to which any of us or all of us can interact with potential young numismatists. We are planting numismatic seeds when we do that, they may lie dormant for a long time while kids get interested in the opposite sex and sports and all their cell phone stuff. But if we have planted even a seed from our passion and our interest, who knows what will happen with that? And it's not an obligation for us, but it's a great honor to be able to touch a young person's life in some way, and maybe, just maybe, have it come to fruition later. So the ball's kind of in our court as well. I mean, Ed French was a mentor for you, and to whatever extent all of us touch someone and mentor even a little bit, who knows where it's going to go. And now, a total second question, but there's something for all of us to think about. Ken, you mentioned that the Eliasberg collection wasn't complete in kind of an offhand comment earlier. I guess I'd always assumed, I'd bought the conventional wisdom that, Louis Eliasberg had every coin that the U.S. Mint ever made. And that piqued my curiosity when you had that comment.
Well, one of my early exercises in learning about numismatics, because it took me a while to get up to speed. I corresponded with Eliasberg, well, actually with his secretary. We had to work through Doris Eberding. I had an opportunity to view and photograph whatever I wanted of his collection. And I checked off in the Red Book every coin that he had, and because I wanted to verify what was in the Red Book, and at the same time learn what was in his collection. I think there were like 5 varieties of coins that weren't there, and they were pretty much minor varieties. It wasn't anything outstanding, but I just, in my mind, said, well, there's a couple of pieces that are missing, and they weren't all that important to him or to anybody, I guess, but it was a magnificent collection. I wouldn't demean it in any way. It's just that technically there were a couple of varieties that weren't there.
I'd also like to add a little bit to what you had mentioned earlier about the young people. One of the really had a huge impact, and I didn't mention it earlier, Ed French was great, but one of the things Ed French actually did was to take me around to coin clubs when I was 16, 15, 14, 13, I don't know the age, 14, 15, and drove me around because my father was a construction worker, was not home most of the time. And that coin clubs, I grew up in Clearwater, Florida, where there were like 5 clubs: Tampa, St. Pete, Largo, Dunedin. There were like a bunch you could go to. And coin clubs are so vital. I mean, well, I probably wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for coin clubs when I was young. And I still really believe in them a lot. I was in my bio, she talked about I had started a coin club in Lexington. And we still get 40 or 50 people a month that come to it. And there is at least 1 or 2 young kids that have come to it now, have picking it up as their profession. So it's actually literally changed lives, even in my local community. So for all of you, if you're into coins and you don't attend a local coin club, you're really missing out. And you're also missing out on an opportunity to help grow the hobby, because local coin clubs are still super, super important. And I think that it's really the grassroots. There's a lot of people who are looking for things to do with their kids that get them off a video game. And if there's not a coin club in your area, start one. A&A's got all the tools to do it. So I'd like to really put a big plug for coin clubs.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for your questions, everyone. And so I'd like to wrap this up with one final question. Ken Bressett and Jeff Garrett, in numismatics and in life, what would you like your legacy to be? And Ken, let's start with you.
Well, I hope that I've inspired somebody to do something, whether it's collecting coins or anything. It's a burning interest. I hope I've inspired somebody to enjoy life more by being dedicated to something like a hobby. I don't care if it's golf or coin collecting or tennis or whatever. You have to have a burning interest to truly enjoy life.
And I think you've inspired a good number of people, Ken. And Jeff, how about you?
Those are kind of two big different questions. Being life, being a, good parent, good husband, things like that are super important. And I put those as kind of like, I value that as much as more than anything, really. But I think I'd like to be kind of known in the hobby of somebody who was willing to give back to the hobby. And at the end of my career, it was kind of like, not how much money he made or what coins he bought and sold. It was kind of the impact I had by the things that I did from a volunteer basis. So that's kind of what I like to be remembered for.
That's wonderful. Well, I want to thank you, Jeff and Ken, and thank you all for participating in this 11th A&A Legacy Series. Ken and Jeff will be around for a few minutes longer to talk with you folks and perhaps sign some autographs at the table at the right. And again, thank you all, and we'll see you next time.
It's great. That was a lot of fun.